Good morning, and we are live. My name is Scott Kennedy, and I'm with my co-host, Nick Kendell, and we like to talk football in the morning. Mid-morning here in the Deep South in Atlanta. Nick is up bright and early at 7 in Seattle, and we normally do Broncos for breakfast. This is more of a deep-fried kind of donut type of brunch for Falcons, but we want to talk Falcons and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, do a little preview this morning. Because on Wednesday we started doing that, but we really got more into discussing about what ails the Falcons right now. And those didn't go away in the last 2 days, so that will be part of our preview as well. But on paper, this is a mismatch. The Vegas odds have this a mismatch. It's the biggest spread at 12.5 to 13.5, depending on where you look. In the NFL for week 2. Not just for, it's a road game. Tampa Bay's won 9 in a row. The Falcons got shellacked by a 4-11 team from last year with basically a rookie quarterback. He was in his 5th start. Now you're going up against Tom Brady. What do you think, Nick? What do you think are some of the things that the Falcons have to do in order to just survive long enough to have a chance in this one?
I'm very basic when it comes to this, but you cannot lose the turnover battle. That's number one. If you're going to win a game, you have to score more points, obviously. But the best thing is turnovers, and it's going to be really hard to win the turnover battle. The Falcons do not have a great offensive line. Matt Ryan is not the most elusive quarterback. You put him behind even a slightly below average offensive line, he'd probably be okay. But we're talking about probably the worst offensive line showing we saw in football last week, unfortunately, with the Falcons. Eagles do have a good – it was bad. Eagles do have a good defensive line. They're really strong in the trenches. So maybe we were underrating them a bit. They went out and, Jason Kelce maybe didn't even play last year, and he was phenomenal last week. I was just in awe with how good Jason Kelce was on that Eagles team. But really got to win the turnover battle, and you need to get a little bit of luck. You need Tom Brady, who, everybody loves Tom Brady. Not everybody, but he's, the GOAT, whatever. But over the last couple of years, he has actually, I feel, been one of the more interception-prone quarterbacks. I think he had 2 versus Dallas as well. So you have a chance to win the turnover battle, and anything can happen. It's in a divisional game. But I think Vegas has it right on paper. This should be a pretty lopsided game. This might be the best team in the NFC versus one of the bottom 3 teams in the NFC. I don't want to say the worst, but they're just so bad in the trenches, it's hard to do anything.
After week 1, I was looking around some power rankings, and I saw Connor Orr of Sports Illustrated had the Falcons 26th. I was like, and I immediately thought of Bull Durham, when they're like, what's our record 8? 18 and 32. It's like, how the hell do we ever win 18? It's like, how could you find 6 teams that looked worse than the Falcons did this week? And to me, it's not just that they lost and lost big. It was how they lost and lost big. When you're getting whipped, and I mean whipped, on both lines of scrimmage, it's hard to figure out how to win a football game.
Yeah.
So you were talking about some of those interceptions. The first one from Tom Brady. Yeah, it's like, okay, Tom Brady threw 2 interceptions. Maybe there's a chink in the armor. First one wasn't even on him. Yeah. The first one was a double play action, set up a screen, and at worst, he threw it a little high and behind Leonard Fournette, so he has to catch it like almost on top of his helmet. But that's a ball that should have been caught, and it kind of bounces up and high and comes back down. So 4 touchdowns and a tipped interception, and then you're watching what they do, and they get rid of the ball so quickly. He gets rid of the ball so quickly. We talk a lot on the Denver Broncos. What is Teddy Bridgewater? What's he going to do? Well, he's going to get the ball to his playmakers quickly. Tom Brady does that as well as anybody. It does that better than anybody. I'm sorry. Getting rid of the ball quickly, and then if you do happen to get him in a 5 to 7 step drop, he'll just loft the ball long and up to Antonio Brown or Mike Evans, or he's got those power forwards up there getting rebounds.
Yeah.
So it's a little tough. I want to say to Dave, who's come in. Dave, appreciate you being here. It says, Scott, the Falcons are just too small of a football team and have been since forever. They consistently get bullied. Dave, if you've heard me talk at all about the former general manager, Thomas Dimitroff, I said he treated this team as if it was if he was representing the quarterback on a 7-on-7 football team. and I don't even say like building a 7-on-7 football team, because then at least you're looking at linebackers and defensive backs. But this was all about quarterback and receivers, overspent for all of them. You get beat in the trenches. They're a fun team sometimes when they're doing well, but then they couldn't win the ones that really mattered because they couldn't stop anybody and couldn't run the ball when they had to.
I do want to circle back to your
and
point.
Appreciate the comment. Nick, what are some of the positives? What are some of the things that you think that you see that the Falcons can do to help alleviate some of the deficiencies they have on the offensive line?
I think they are going to have to. It's so hard because of how good this Tampa Bay team is on paper. I mean, defense, offense, they might be the best roster in the NFL. But I think you have to be almost stubborn with your run game because you have to protect your quarterback and you have to let your offensive line play forward rather than on their heels with the pass blocking. And I know that's going to be very difficult because there is not a better linebacker duo in football than Levante David and Devin White. There's not a better nose tackle in football than Vita Vea. But you're going to have to get maybe a little bit creative with your run game and be forceful with that and hope your defense can hold out. It's easier said than done in that regard. But I think that's the strategy, and maybe get a little bit creative. I mean, you brought in Arthur Smith, who did a great run job with Tennessee. They looked lost this last week against the Cardinals, man. Talk about a disappointing week one. But
it's not so easy to say, well, we're going to be running the same system.
Yeah,
not as easy as all that. That doesn't always seem to work.
Yeah, there's only one Derrick Henry. But that's the one that kind of gets me going. I really liked what I saw from Cordell Patterson this week. Maybe you see some, and I think the NFL as a whole, we saw like the highest rate of split backfield in like a decade this last week. So maybe some Mike Davis and Cordell Patterson out there getting some interesting matchups, especially if you can, I mean, as good as Devin White is, if you can isolate him against Cordell Patterson outside, that should be a good matchup that you might be able to create an explosive play from. So that's something that I would be looking for defensively. Man, you have to hope that Tom Brady is going to throw a couple ducks up there. I mean, he, as good as he is, the arm talent has faded a bit, and he can be a little bit aggressive from time to time. Last year, he was pretty high up there in picks. Obviously, one of the ones last week wasn't his fault, but still, he can. It's just they have a good offensive line. Even they have good weapons. I don't know if the Falcons have the pass rush or the depth in the back seven to really take care of it. I mean, you mentioned Antonio Brown and Mike Evans, but they got Chris Godwin, who might even be their best wide receiver. Rob Gronkowski, who was, exhausted and retired. Man, he looks as good as he's ever looked. So this is a lopsided matchup. And I hate to be, super pessimistic. But I mean, it would be a pretty big upset if you guys walked out of this game with a W.
There's two things. There's two keys I'm looking at right now where Dallas had some success. Dallas abandoned the running game pretty early.
Yeah.
The Falcons won't do that. So the front four was fairly well neutralized by the Dallas Cowboys for Tampa Bay. However, they didn't have any success running against them either. The Falcons won't abandon the running game that quickly. But where they had success is where I start wondering, okay, can the Falcons do this? So they were throwing a lot of quick screens to the wide receivers, a lot of wide receiver quick screens. The Falcons don't have the personnel necessarily to do it in that same manner. You got Calvin Ridley, you got Russell Gage. Those are two decent options for that same screen pass. But if you're lining up with a base 2 tight end set, even if it's Hayden Hurst and Kyle Pitts, you can't necessarily throw them quick screens unless you move them outside to the slot. Okay, well, that might work then. But then you're not really in a double tight. You're in a 4 wide with 2 tight ends. But Hayden Hurst can play that position, and we know darn well Kyle Pitts can play that position.
Yeah.
So I think we might see some of that going on, but then you can spread them out a little bit because then you don't have any real fear of the running game because you're just blocking with 5 at the time. So there's 2 ways to think of that, but I think you've got to find a way to get the ball the way Dallas did to your receivers quickly. And not necessarily that's not necessarily Arthur Smith's forte. He wants to run the ball and play action, which is going to take a little more time. But I don't think you've got the luxury of time in this game.
Yeah, you really don't. It's going to be the personnel does not match the scheme right now. Besides the 2 tight ends, I will say that's a good point. It's just so hard because the the Buccaneers have such a good linebacking duo. I mean, Levante David has probably been the most underrated linebacker for a decade. Hurts me to say because I really don't like the Nebraska Cornhuskers, but got to give them their props when they were good. And I think Devin White is much more of a box kind of roaming player. So if you have two tight ends, I'd be picking on Devin White as much as I could in space. But it's gonna be tough. You're gonna have to have Matt Ryan have a heck of a game, and that's one thing too. At least you have a quarterback who and we've seen it. Matt Ryan can go unconscious. Like a shooter, he can just start dialing it up. I mean, he's not going to go out there and be making crazy broken plays outside of structure, Aaron Rodgers style, constantly. But he can go unconscious and keep a team in a game. He's that level of quarterback. But it's going to be hard to win schematically, personnel wise. So we'll see. I definitely agree with you though that the tight ends is the way to go, especially if you can keep Tampa Bay in more of a base package because you're loading the box so much, and then you might have some space on the outside, especially with a quick pass game, if Tampa Bay is going to be loading the box in that regard.
Well, the Falcons basically use Julio Jones like a running back a lot with a lot of quick screens, quick slants, bubble screens, get the ball to him. And I kind of blame that as a reason why his red zone production was always so low. Is, he had 14 catches a game, and they were usually 3 or 4 of them on bubble screens, getting the ball down the field. And then he's had his ass kicked for, 6 or 7 plays coming down. Then he comes out in the red zone. But I think, Kyle Pitts is going to be carrying an extra 40 pounds on Julio, 25 pounds, but he is more apt to take that type of bubble screen, quick hitch, slants, get the ball to him quickly and take that punishment, move the ball and use that as an extension of the running game. Watching Tom Brady and the Bucs, I just was shaking my head, on offense, because the Dallas early, they tried just about everything to try and slow them down. They didn't have a whole lot of luck. And one play in particular, they get down inside the 5. Dallas rushes 6. They rushed 6 on him. Like, okay, we're going to put some pressure on him. Gronk slows down his block and then just kind of turns his back and backs into the end zone. Brady slides outside of the pocket and just throws it in the vicinity. Gronk had 5 guys around him, including his own receiver in the same spot. So his guy was double covered. There are 2 guys around him. And all of a sudden, it's just you throw it in there and it just sticks. It's like you can't defend that. I'm like, that's completely indefensible. So hopefully you're keeping them from getting down there in that area to begin with, because you're in trouble down there with a way that those 2 can hook up.
Yeah, what are they, the most touchdowns between a quarterback and a pass catcher ever? Are they number 1? It might be Montana and Jerry Rice, but
I think because Montana and Rice was split almost halfway in between Steve Young and Joe Montana, that he doesn't quite have that number, so that wouldn't surprise me. Because Rice was really, really good for both quarterbacks. I think he was just about evenly split. Someone that's watching might be able to Google that real quick and check it out for me.
Going down a wormhole just to get on Gronk, because I'm a big tight end aficionado. I love the tight end position. That's what I played also. So going both ways, and being from Iowa, you kind of have to appreciate the tight end. Otherwise, you're not going to really enjoy offensive football. But do you think Gronk is the best weapon, so pass catcher or skill position player in the last decade, 15 years? Because obviously this is hard for you to say because Julio Jones, but I feel like because Gronk there's nobody who even comes close to his peak at his position, and the way he's able to score touchdowns, that he might be the most valuable, unique pass catcher or skill position player the last 15 years.
Well, I think the combination of them makes it happen that way, because Tony Gonzalez was pretty darn good.
Yeah.
But he didn't have the quarterback play of Tom Brady, during his career.
Elvis Grbac was great.
Antonio Gates was freakish like that. And it's one of the reasons I always say, scouting these guys, that, quarterback or football is it's an athlete's game.
Yeah.
You don't hear about guys like Antonio Gates saying, you know what, I'm going to give up football my sophomore year in college and I'm going to go play shortstop and get drafted to the major leagues, or point guard. That doesn't happen. But guys do that and come play tight end. In fact, both of those guys that I just mentioned, Tony Gonzalez and Antonio Gates, were basketball players. Good feet, good hands, rebounding. But no, just because of Gronk's durability and ability to be on the field all the time, He's ahead of Julio Jones for sure for what you can do. Calvin Johnson was just, when we talk about freak of freaks, and I'm biased there because Calvin Johnson, he's a Georgia kid. He's down from Tyrone, Georgia, went to Sandy Creek High School. So I'm a little biased there, but, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm wrong. But what's amazing is, we talk about throwing guys open, just get it near him. Like I said, it just stuck. He's between these 5 feet apart. Tom Brady throws it at him, and all of a sudden his hands just appear. I mean, how quick do your hands and reactions have to be in order to pull that off? That's the kind of stuff that doesn't get quantified when we're doing height, weight, 40s, and all these type of things that makes a player from a good athlete to a great football player. And, he's pretty great.
Well, hopefully this is a game of maybe a passing of the gauntlet for best tight end in football for Rob Gronkowski to Kyle Pitts. So, no, we'll see. But, let's get into this. Do you think Pitts will be able to consistently get separation in the NFL? This is an easy yes for me. I mean, he's right now, it seems like he's just freaking by guys, which he was able to do in college. There isn't as much nuance in his game. I feel like especially when he's running routes, sometimes he's a little bit tall. I mean, he's 6'5", that's going to happen, but because of that, you could see a little bit more snapping on the top of his route stems. But that's something that's going to come in time, right? Like he's a rookie right now. I'm not that worried about that. So getting separation, he's not going to look like Wes Welker out there. He doesn't have to, right? He's an alien out there. So he'll be able to get separation.
Yeah, and do I think he'll be able to consistently get separation? Yeah, for sure. I think you're gonna have to get him more into space. I mean, he's a tight end in name only. You don't want him battling in the trenches. Who's the big defensive end for New Orleans? Cam Jordan.
Yeah.
Talking about he doesn't want to play inside. I'm like, well, Cam was right. He was mouthing off a little bit. He's gonna break him in half. Well, Kyle Pitts wasn't drafted to block Cam Jordan.
No.
That's going to be Jake Matthews' job. He's a wide receiver. I've said for 6 months now, when I watch Kyle Pitts move, I see Plaxico Burress. That's who he reminds me of, with probably a little bit more speed. Yeah. But Plaxico was, he was a monster wide receiver. That's where Kyle Pitts is going to be. You think he can outrun any linebacker out there. He's got the largest wingspan of any player in the last 20 years. Yeah. There's separation right there. I mean, his main separation is you're right in front of me and I can reach a foot out farther than here. Yeah. There's separation. But now you got to make sure that you're getting him in the right situations. He knows offense because he made a mental mistake down on 1st and goal by lining up in the wrong spot. Those are mental mistakes. We talk about false starts being mental mistakes, but some of those false starts were because the guys in front of them, Chris Lindstrom, or not Chris Lindstrom, but Drew Dahlman and Jalen Mayfield were just completely overmatching them, and they were gun shy, but they survived. We showed last show a play of Drew Dahlman in particular. He got his back broken by Javon Mayfield, not Mayfield, Hargrave, and in the next play he jumps off sides. I'm like, he was probably terrified at that point. This guy just about killed me, but they survived. You survived it, Rook. We're on to the next time. He'll be a little better for that. Mayfield will be a little better for that.
Hopefully.
How much better? We'll see.
Yeah, and Matt Ryan is starting to look like one. I'm not sure what you're getting at there, Mo Ron, but Matt Ryan might find it a good home next year. And we got Brian Dunn saying Manning Harrison, 114 touchdowns. That might be number one. That would make sense. You had a really good run there with Manning to Harrison. Maybe it's Rob and Tom have the most touch.
Brian, if you're on Google, look up Jerry Rice for us and find out how many of his touchdowns were split between Steve Young and Joe Montana. That would be interesting to me because I think it's probably fairly close. What was he, about 180 touchdowns in his career? But it was split between two guys, and then two's Brady and Gronk. So he's got 14 to go. You think he's got 14? Do you think Gronk has 14 touchdowns left in him? From Brady?
2 more years. 2 more years, it might happen. That's a pretty big number right there. But there's so many mouths to feed there in that Tampa Bay offense too. So I don't know. It's a good problem to have. But
you're gonna get. I guess that's the question. Are you gonna get 2 more years out of them?
Brady just said yesterday he wants to play until he's 50. So we'll see. But yeah, no, it's going to be interesting. I do want to circle back to Kyle Pitts. You talked about him being a glorified wide receiver at that position. Do you believe in this scheme and just for him to function in the NFL? Obviously, he's going to make his money as a receiver, but he does have to at least develop some inline just for opposing defenses to put linebackers in there, because otherwise he could just run
Kyle Pitts just has to be serviceable at that. So when in Arthur Smith's two tight end sets, if it's a running situation, he's got a run blocking specialist as the other tight end. And Lee Smith was that guy. When I was at practice and they were doing warm-ups and doing individuals, Lee Smith was actually going with the offensive lineman to do his warm-ups, number 85. Now, Lee Smith didn't have a great game either, missing some blocks and doing that type of stuff. But, nobody did that was in charge of blocking. But at 6'5", 6'6", 245 pounds, and he'll play at 260 within the next 3 years. All he has to do is be a get-in-your-way type of guy against linebackers or blitzing safeties or anything like that. He doesn't have to take on the Cam Jordans, the Jason Pierre-Pauls of the world in order to try and stop that. Because if those guys are pass rushing, Kyle Pitts is out he's out running routes. He's not in there blocking. Yeah. So I think he'll be fine. It's never going to be his specialty, but how many of when we talk about greatest tight ends in history, does anybody ever mention what great blockers they were? No.
No.
That's not what they do.
I do, but I'm a Hawkeye, right? You're not getting on the field unless you can block.
But again, be serviceable. You got to be able to do a job.
Yep.
And he'll be fine there. He'll be fine there.
I do want to talk a little bit. We got Montana to Rice 67, Young to Rice 92. So man, God bless Jerry Rice, man. That's a heck of a lot.
He's number one on my list all time.
Yeah, it's
the best football player. It's two positions that you might not normally think of, but 1 and 2 for me, and you can tell when I grew up, is Jerry Rice and Lawrence Taylor.
I was going to say Lawrence Taylor.
Just LT.
Is Aaron Donald approaching that conversation because he's been so consistently dominant?
Who's this?
Aaron Donald. Because nobody's doing it at his position the way he is, right? Like it's like if you had a catcher in baseball that was super good defensively, how much value they bring at the catching position, but they're hitting like Babe Ruth. You don't see anybody giving the production from the interior defensive line like Aaron Donald.
Right.
So it'll be an interesting conversation. And Bruce Smith is also another one. Maybe.
Yeah, I was gonna say Reggie White, because he was playing at that similar. Those guys were playing at 290 pounds also, and could jump inside and outside with Bruce Smith and Reggie White. So, but again, once you get something stuck in your mind, you got to kind of knock out the champ, and it's going to be awfully hard for anybody to knock Jerry Rice off of my list of the greatest football player of all time.
Absolutely. I agree with you there. Jerry Rice, the GOAT, as DBA saying it here. We talked a lot of Falcons offense versus Tampa Bay defense. I'm curious about your thoughts about this Falcons defense versus the Tampa Bay offense, though, because I'll be honest with you. I'm a draft guy. I follow the NFL pretty religiously, especially the process of college to draft to NFL. Looking over this Falcons depth chart, there's a lot of names where I'm like, I kind of recognize this name. I saw them on the field, but this is not a team that has many guys that I am very familiar with. I'm going to be just completely honest. Linebacking core to Steven Means, Foyesade Olukun.
Foye Olukun is a good player. Yeah,
okay.
He's a good player, but he's you're in a 3-4, and your linebackers are undersized. Your middle linebackers are 215, 220. They're fast, so they're pretty good in coverage. They're good laterally. But you can run on these guys. Deion Jones is super fast, but I want him in a nickel. I don't necessarily want him all the time in that. So Deion Jones is really good, but you got two journeymen starting at safety, in Daron Harmon and Eric Harris.
Yep.
That's not good. Fabian Moreau came in, started at the corner opposite AJ Terrell, and he was picked on immediately by Jalen Hurts with the Eagles. So probably a minus there when we're talking about, if you're a baseball guy, you like that WAR statistic, wins against replacement. He might be those three guys in the secondary might be negatives.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the draft pedigree of these guys. I mean, you literally have, I think it looks like 2 or 3 players that were top 100 picks, according to 4. Excuse me, Fabian Moreau was, I think, a compensatory pick on that starting line. This is not. I mean, obviously, draft pedigree does not.
And Dante Fowler is one of those guys, and as far as high draft picks, and he was a high dollar free agent, but he got his pay cut. Last year, it's like, you're either going to take a pay cut or you're going to get waived.
Yeah.
So he's playing for a contract. So,
Yeah.
at best, he plays his way into another double-digit sack guy. At worst, you'll get some salary cap relief next year because he restructured his contract. But no, you look across the board, going on that defense and how it matches up. And in the 3-4, Grady Jarrett's lining up as a defensive end. He was fairly well neutralized by a good, let's not take anything away from Philadelphia Eagles. Their offensive line is good. A good Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. But is he quick enough to really be a good defensive end where he is a great defensive tackle? So, I'm for moving him inside a little bit and getting him a little bit closer to the ball and have him be where he's been a 2-time Pro Bowler than being outside a little bit more. And then they've got to get some pressure off the edge. Jacob Tuioti-Mariner was the only one that had a sack last week, and that was on a wraparound play. He was pushed wide. Jalen Hurts is strolling. Sack. That's cover sack. And I think Hurts may have gotten hit one more time. Tom Brady won't move around that much, so you might be able to get him dirty a few more times, but you're not sacking him. He's not going to take a bunch of sacks either.
No. Yeah, he's not. It's rough here. You're right about Dimitroff. I will say, looking at the Tampa Bay offensive line, I think I made this point on Wednesday as well. There's a lot of highly invested players there as far as draft pedigree, but this defense has been neglected. I do like that you have a difference maker on paper on every level with A.J. Terrell, Deion Jones, and Grady Jarrett, but it's just you don't have – defense is about, the sum of the whole. You need 14 guys who are pretty good and maybe 6, building block players, and they're just not here. They're just not here.
No, it's why I said, a couple things I scoffed at during the draft was, one of them, Kyle Pitts is a win now move. Are you joking? Not with his defense. And 2, I was for trading down. That was when looking at the draft. I'm like, there's so many holes to fill on this team, both sides of the ball, but especially on defense, which was ranked towards the bottom of the league last year, and worse in pass defense. That you're looking at that and saying you need multiple players. I would have snatched your hand off if you had offered me the same deal that the 49ers offered the Dolphins, but you needed to be one spot higher. You needed to make sure that you guarantee to get one of the 3 top quarterbacks in order to make that deal. So, I get asked a lot, how do you think that new general manager Terry Fontenot is doing? I said, I think he's doing fine with what he's got to do, but I would be very interested to know what the Falcons were offered for that number 4 pick, because I would have been real interested in what the Bears offered just to move up to get Justin Fields with an extra number 1. I'm like, okay, you got my attention. You would have had to drop back, but let's throw in another second for this year. Now I've got a first and 2 seconds to try and start filling some holes for this team. Now I'm interested. But then when it came out that Julio Jones was leaving after the draft, okay, now it makes sense. Makes a little more sense. You got a guy for maybe the next 12 years who can be just another Julio Jones for the next 10 years, and you didn't have to trade 5 picks to get him like you did Julio Jones.
Yeah, no, it absolutely makes sense. Do you think that – so let's pivot a little bit, because unfortunately this is where my brain goes, but I saw enough from the Falcons on Sunday that I'm like, okay, well, probably need to start pivoting expectations for what's next and draft and team building versus, okay, how are we going to jostle ourselves into playoff position? I know it's early to be waving that white flag, but from here, it's like, I don't know how you could function. So
I don't see any way this is a playoff team with as bad as the offensive line. I mean, the only way this is a playoff team is if the offensive and defensive lines improve dramatically. Those are 2 gigantic ifs, because the old saying goes, it's not the X's and the O's, it's the Jimmys and the Joes. And the Falcons are seriously lacking ability on both lines. That's a bad situation to be in. Like I said, it's not that you got beat 32-6. It's how you got beat 32-6. If you can't block or stop from being blocked, how are you going to win football games? How?
Not very conducive for winning football games. So NFL draft. Hey Jay Roper, how you doing? What is the move for the Falcons in a vacuum this offseason as far as the draft goes? Are you looking edge? You looking cornerback? Maybe resetting the quarterback contract as well? I mean, what's the move?
Yeah, I think, real quick, because we wanted to go 30 minutes, and we're right there knocking on the door.
Yeah.
I would think, if Thibodeau's a guy, if he's the guy you think he can be, if he's a number one edge rusher, if he's a Myles Garrett, Chase Young type, I don't have any problem with that pick, number one overall.
No.
Let's assume worst case, this is where the Falcons got their choice of anybody. It's possible. It might not be probable. Jacksonville could be going back-to-back number ones, but
Jacksonville, Detroit, very bad.
but the Falcons with the number one overall pick isn't completely out of the question in my mind. So let's talk about best case. You got your choice of anybody. Even if I have to trade up 2 or 3 spots to get him, who's it going to be? Until I see more out of the quarterbacks, I'd probably say Thibodeau, the defensive end from Oregon, might be my number one right now. But we got a long way to go for that. I don't have any problem with a defensive end, an offensive tackle, or a quarterback in one of those 3 spots. You've got to get a franchise premier position player. What can you get? You can probably get a decent level out of Matt Ryan for the next 3 or 4 years. If the defensive end that you think can be that guy is there, okay, I can live with that one.
What about the cornerback position? I know you just invested in AJ Terrell, but I mean, this looks like a really good cornerback class. There are 3 that I think could be top 15 caliber picks.
Then I'd want to trade down.
Yeah.
Okay. If there's 3 I like, then I want to come down and get more picks. And that might be, that's still the best case scenario for me. For a team like this, again, I've said it a zillion times. I grew up in the 80s, and I watched Jerry Jones trade down, or Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones trade down every time and just accumulate more players. It's like, instead of picking 26, I'm going to pick 35th and 38th. And I'm going to have 2 guys. And my odds of hitting on 2 guys that are separated by 10 to 15 spots is exponentially better. Yeah. So when you're the Falcons, unless you got the franchise player at a premier position, and I'm talking left tackle, defensive end, quarterback, man, come out of that spot. Come down.
Yeah.
Start accumulating draft picks because you don't have the salary cap space in order to fix all the holes you need. At least go get Young. And I don't mean Chase Young. I mean get Young. Get young and talented, because that will excite the fan base. That will get people involved and give you a little more time to say, okay, I see what we're doing here. We're accumulating young, talented players. The Matt Ryan contract's going to come off. The salary cap relief will come in the next 2 years. We've got this nice core. We can add some veterans. Now we're going to make a run. So that's what I'd say.
Conversation for another day. More valuable position, cornerback or offensive tackle? I don't know. I'm very interested in I think it's a conversation at least. Jeremy Sean saying, let's be honest.
No, Jeremy, you're right. I meant to correct myself on that. It was Jimmy Johnson running that. I don't think Jerry liked how much credit Jimmy was getting, and that's why he ended up leaving. That was Jimmy Johnson, and Jimmy Johnson at Miami also made we're going to take a safety and make him a linebacker. We're going to make a linebacker, make him a defensive end, and playing everybody just to get speed on the defense. So yeah, that good call on that one. Yeah. But again, my point is accumulate more players, especially when you're in a position where Jimmy Johnson was coming in, where they were 1-15 in Troy Aikman's first season. Get more players. You need them.
Yep, absolutely. I agree with you. Well, probably about time to start wrapping up. Final predictions of this game. I'm going to go Tampa Bay winning this one 38-17. I think that it's going to be pretty lose control pretty early, unfortunately. And biggest matchup, I think Vita Vea is absolutely just going to King Kong, Godzilla in the downtown, that interior offensive line.
The Cowboys did a pretty good job against him. I'd be interested to know how good is the interior line with the Dallas Cowboys, because they were manning up one-on-one with him a lot. Vea's going to get his opportunities, of course, but I really watched that matchup in the first half, and Dallas did a good job with him. So, Jason Pierre-Paul's been out this week with a hand injury, was listed as a DNP for yesterday. Him not playing is a huge advantage. That's a big deal with him coming off of the defensive end. So that's an advantage for the Falcons if they can get some more time there.
Yep, I agree.
But I agree. I don't have any idea how they're going to stop stop Tom Brady. I'm reading through the comments and see Montana popping up. I don't know how they're going to stop Tom Brady. And the fun thing is, too, the first 2 punts from the Buccaneers punter, he dropped it inside the 5. So it's like, great, we got to stop. Oh, man, maybe they'll go for it. We got a better chance of stopping them here on 4th and 2 than trying to dig out of a hole from our own 5 with this offensive line. So 38-13, I think, is fair. I think the Buccaneers cover. But, maybe we're too quick to write the Falcons off after week 1. That was the first time these guys had been on the field together because they didn't play any in the preseason.
True.
So maybe there's a big leap from week 1 to week 2. I think that's what you have to hope for if you're a Falcons fan. I just don't happen to see it. With that, Nick, I want to say thanks for being here. Everybody that's in the chat and is watching on demand after the fact, make sure you hit that like, follow, and share and subscribe button. It's a big help to us. We're knocking on the door of 1,000 subscribers. I think we were 876 after our last live show. So every time we do one of these, we add a few more, and thank you very much for that. Nick, where will you be next?
I'm going to be chilling here in the rain. No, it's going to be good. We're about to be blasted with a rainstorm here in Seattle, so I'm hoping our power holds up because they're saying 50 to 60 mile an hour winds. So we'll see about that. But this Saturday, I'm going to be live doing Mile High Insiders at 7 o'clock Mountain Time, getting into our final preparations for the Jacksonville Jaguars versus Denver Broncos. Maybe you'll have to bring in a second computer in here to keep that Auburn-Penn State game on while it's going because I'm super excited for college football this week. I'm also really excited for Purdue versus Notre Dame. George Karlaftis, watch out for him, defensive end. Notre Dame's offensive line's been good, but they are not great this year. And I love George Karlaftis. He's probably my favorite player in this draft class. So going to be doing that and trying to stay dry.
Well, it should be interesting. It's been kind of the Auburn Scott Kennedy tour. I went to Auburn. They played Akron, where I was born, and my mom went in week 1. Now they play Penn State in week 3, where my dad went. So it's been a very Kennedy Auburn Tiger first couple weeks of the season. This is their first real test. So we'll see how that goes. It should be interesting up in Happy Valley having an SEC team going up north. That doesn't happen very often.
No, crossing the Mason-Dixie line, right? That's going up to Yank territory, but it should be a good game. I'm definitely pro Big Ten and you're SEC, so we're a little bit at each other here. We'll have to have some bragging rights on this one, but it should be a good weekend of football. And I'm probably just going to hunker down and enjoy it all.
Hunker down. Now you sound like a Southerner.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate everybody being here. And thanks to everybody that watches after the fact. Like I said, hit that like, follow, share, and subscribe button. And we'll see you next time.